Welcome back to Coffee with the Editor here in Cape Town with the Railway Safety Regulator at their annual conference and exhibition. I'm joined for this Coffee with the Editor with Tshepo, CEO of the Gautrain Management Agency. Tshepo, thank you very much for joining me. So there's lots happening with Gautrain at the moment. What's the latest status and specifically on the expansion?
The expansion is on probably in November. We will reveal the new network, which will go from the 150 that we've announced to probably close on to 360 kilometers of additional track, which will cover the province in its entirety. That network is intended to be able to go back to what the Gautrain was, which is a tool for empowering the economy of the province itself. It will link up all 7 SEZs. So we're going to the Vaal River City, we're going to the west, to the agro-processing and what do they call it, and the automotive bus building yard. We're going to Tazas and past Tazas into that area in the north of Pretoria. So we're also resolving the R80 problem. Pretoria has grown to the east in leaps and bounds, so the network that we had designed for Pretoria East doesn't make sense anymore. Well, it covers some parts of it, but we've had to sit down and relook the East Rand in a greater manner, rather than just ending up at Boxesback. Could we actually go all the way to Danota and to the supply park and also to the Tambo Springs area? That in itself creates a great opportunity because we've also had to think about the arrival of the high-speed railway line. And what does that mean to our network and everything else? So how does it connect back? So how do we actually create efficiencies that we were intending to and that Europe is finding great value in, where trains deliver you into the heart of the city, and which is something that the airline industry cannot do. The airports are always outside of the city, and it wouldn't even be possible to build any airports in the inner city if it wasn't for small aircraft. But anything bigger than that, and that is the power of rail. When you look at it overall, what Ferrovia in Italia and Trenitalia have done, they give you a point-to-point service. So you depart from Milan and you'll be dropped off just at, what do they call it, at the canal's edge in Venice, and you just take a boat and you go to your hotel, and that's the beauty of what we're looking at doing. But what that means is that we'll have to think differently about the expansion, and we are a greater part of what Gauteng wants to go back to being. If you listen to the Premier, he talks about the power of construction, and as I said, this is a phrase that I wish I had come up with, but well, we will always credit to him. He said, let the cranes go up and let the crime come down. And that to me is the essence of what we're trying to do. Can we create jobs through infrastructure? And as we create jobs through infrastructure, how do we actually make sure that we have growth of the economy in Gauteng? But we've gone one step further with the extensions. Yeah. We are now looking at what does it mean to our neighbouring provinces.
Okay, so before you start talking about that Africa strategy, let's just take a step back. You highlighted November as a announcement. When do we start breaking ground? Because that's when the cranes go up.
So the big issue now is one of the things that we're doing as we're doing the second phase of the feasibility study is relooking our procurement model. The idea that we're going to actually spend a lot more time studying the problem and then giving it to the market later doesn't actually make sense anymore. We want to move. So within the 7th administration, we have to be on the ground. There is no two ways about it. And the best way to fast track this is we've done as much as we need to do. We're clear about what we want to achieve. We know the touch point. We're clear. So one of the things that we're doing clearly now is, and that affects railway line, is station locations. And that is a great part of the announcement. So we're now putting pins on the map, telling you exactly where each of the stations are going to be. In the announcement, I will also be making you aware of what we will do to Jabulani Station, the integration between the two stations, the Gautrain one and the Prasa one. We will show you what we will do to Rhodoport. We're rebuilding Rhodoport entirely. In a few decades from now, you will not be able to recognize Rhodoport. Rhodoport will be as beautiful or even as big as Sandton is. Jabulani will be the same. And we've integrated ourselves into the Lanseria Smart City. But we're saying to the Smart City, if you just simply reconfigure yourself differently, you can actually be the takeoff for the Rustenburg line, which becomes the Mafikeng line. So that in itself, it's a new way of thinking, and us recognizing that we're we're beyond the regional powerhouse. We're the connecting point of everything, they call it in our greater, region, including going into neighbouring countries. So it's not just about neighbouring provinces, it's also going into neighbouring countries. And we are locating ourselves as the Gautrain to be the central hub of exactly that. But what are we trying to do as Gauteng? We're trying to go back where we are the true economic hub of the country. But not only go back there, but supersize the economy through making sure that Rustenburg is 25 to 30 minutes away.
Yes, accessible.
It's accessible, and Rustenburg can access Sandton and can access the airport. Mafikeng should actually be only an hour away from the airport. Polokwane should only be an hour, 15 minutes away from the airport. Yeah. Through that, you will reinforce not only the economic capability of Gauteng, but in addition to that, we're also looking at how do we cross-subsidize lines. So our strategy to be able to put on time-related evacuation goods will be a big part of the strategy.
So that's freight and passenger?
It's freight and passenger. So if I could move fruit quite quickly to the central hub, and once the Durban line is built, then I can push it straight down to Durban. In certain cases, if I could get fruits out of Groblersdal quickly onto the Limpopo rail link and then down into Gauteng, I could have that quick evacuation. So, and now the issue of city deep and its boundaries creates a problem. So Tambo Springs becomes a much more urgent project than anything else. Yeah. And so we're looking at it with a bigger view of us being a regional network rather than be a localized one. But what that meant, it meant that we had to look at the company itself.
So you've made some changes, yes. Hey? Some structural
changes.
And what does that picture look like now?
The rail, we're struggling with the name. So let me put that up front.
Okay, so because it can't be Gautrain.
Well, looking on what everybody asked, I had an interesting meeting with the Minister of Mobility, or the MEC here yesterday, and says, I also want a Gautrain in the Western Cape.
It would make such a difference.
But there's an important thing in there. So if I go to Durban, everybody says, I want a Gautrain in Durban. Yeah. Now, we will remain the Gautrain in Durban. So that's, we're struggling with the name. I thought we were going to keep the acronym, which was the GMA, but become the Gauteng Management Agency. But we can't do that either. So in a sense, we've got a rail operations and assurance company, which will host the services similar to what we do today, a rail and operations company. But the point with that is that what that will do, it will allow us to run the Gautrain, run Limpopo Rail, run high-speed networks, but it is preparing us to actually receive any parts of devolution that happen later on. So we will be ready to operate and manage services that are, what do they call it, that get devolved. And we are willing to do it for every other city. So we are also structuring ourselves in such a way that entity will be willing, for a fee obviously, to do the work for other cities, and so that's the one bit of it. The second bit of it is that we recognize that you try by all means to keep separate lines between what is implementation of railway projects and its assurance and operations. Because what that allows you to do is, during design, you don't have the same people looking at the same mistake, yes, and they don't see the mistakes they're making from an operations perspective. But at the same time, from an engineering perspective, they don't see the mistake of what they are, the mistake. If you put them as the same team. So we've separated out the teams. But we also recognize that there is a greater market in the continent in itself for implementation of projects. So we've got a project delivery group that will be there to be able to implement large projects. And similarly, during implementation, the likes of KZN High Speed and Limpopo Rail and Mloto Rail will go into this cluster. And Gautrain 2 will also go into the same cluster. And we're busy populating that structure to be able to make sure that we have enough rail engineers, but enough rail-related project managers, because that's one of the things that the industry struggles from.
Shortage of that. Yes.
Shortage of that. So the second thing has been something that we've been doing, but we now are scaling it. The third thing is the one thing that we've been doing, but we're scaling it up. So we're building a licensing agency. So all the licensing, your driver's licensing, your discs, we can do your discs now. I did my 2 cars the other day. It literally took me 5 minutes. I was done. I was out of there. So no more long queues, but we're also taking the opportunity to be able to look at what the Tshepo's demise could actually create a big opportunity to a great degree. So a lot of those services we're taking back, but we're building a large licensing agency. What are we doing with that? So what we're doing is, in essence, is we've digitalized those services. So we've made them quicker, we've made them better, we've made them cashless. But we're stopping a lot of the leakage that used to be in the system. So because there's no cash, there is no ability for you to be able to ask somebody to do you a favor, to do anything. All transactions are recorded. And for us, that's an important part. We estimate at the current moment that the province probably loses close to R500 million in just pure leakage in the system because of all the issues that are there. And that in itself will increase revenue, but increase the efficiency of the service also as a whole. So beyond that, then we have a property company. So one of the things that we've not done, or we've done partially well, is that we've given rise to a lot of economic development, but it has not been through our own doing. It has been through organically, you put up a station and then the
activity happens around it.
Gautrain 2, we actually are taking those lessons learned, and one of the things that we're doing is we're taking up much greater tracts of land around stations, which are particularly there for development. But we're building an entity specifically so. So one of the announcements we're going to make soon is about the new Waterfall station, which will spare on Waterfall 2, which is the other side of our depot. So that in itself, it's a great opportunity that is there. And it has been dormant for a while, but because we haven't had an entity that engages the property developers, what it did is it then meant that we were a bit muted about that conversation. We've got another hotelier who wants to come and build a hotel at Rhodesfield. We're working through the PFMA issues there because, certain things you cannot just do in this is government and government led. So.
And you are, government owned.
Yeah, we're government owned. So that in itself is, and then we've got a technology company. So one of the things that we've done over the last probably 10 years was develop our own software for management of projects. We've developed our own, so we've got our own electronic tender system, which we launched in 2020, and we've been running off it completely. So we're now rolling it out to other government entities, and we even have interest from the private sector. People have tried to do it. And what is the difference between us and any other platform that you can buy online? Is that we are PFMA compliant already. So you do not need to configure the back end so that it can be PFMA compliant. So that is some of the stuff that we're doing. There's additional mandates that have been coming through. So we also have an entity that does advisory services we call it Agency Management as a Service. And in there at the current moment we're hosting, so you might have heard that we've renegotiated the bus contracts in Gauteng. We did that work. Most people actually don't know that we did that work. So I actually led the project when we renegotiated the bus contracts. So we did that work, but now the issue is the know-how of running projects where we need to return the contract to is not there. So now we're getting extended to where we're saying, well, could you actually help us build the entity to manage this? And in the meantime, during that period of time, can you manage the contract on our behalf? And it's been spectacular, and it's an incredible sense of what we're doing. It actually works. And as we continue on, we will actually be able to get more services. We're helping one of our sister entities actually corporatize. We are currently partially running the Transport Authority. So as it is right now, I'm actually the interim CEO of the Transport Authority also, as if I'm not busy with anything.
Yeah, I was just about to say, are you not busy enough, Tshepo? Okay, but let's go back, because there's probably three things that we really need to touch on. So I think we kind of get the role as an implementation agency, and definitely with the changes coming through at GMA. But let's talk about devolution, because devolution, it was a topic that came up in the rail reform and the policy. It's been something that everybody's like, let's wait for the minister, or let's wait for IREC, or let's wait for this. Where are we at, and what role are you playing?
At the current moment, and being the interim CEO of the Transport Authority for Gauteng, what it means is I am in the middle of the whole thing, so I have to keep up with what is going on. But what I've done is recently is take time to be able to understand the idea, understand what has worked, what has not worked, and what the rail policy actually enables. Because one of the things that people miss is that there is an enablement in the rail policy that actually is being sidestepped when we start talking about devolution. Now, let's go back to it. So the creation of this vertically separated railway industry is important to devolution. And it is important to the stance that each of the provinces and each of the cities take about devolution. Because you have to think through, what are you devolving? First and foremost, not even what are you devolving, what are you after?
Yes.
As a city and as a, what do they call it, and as a province, what are you after? You're actually after services. Does that mean for you to be able to deliver the services, you need to get hold of the assets? You need to get hold of the people that provide those assets? You need to get hold of the operator? Not necessarily. Does that mean for you to have power, you need to get hold of the budget? It might be. But I'm saying you have to know what you are after. You are after service. And because you're after service, you might be utilizing the wrong tactic and strategy to be able to get that service. The UK model. The UK model in itself, it gave a lot of regions the ability to have control over their services, but Network Rail kept the network.
Yes.
And provided the network openly to everybody.
As an infrastructure manager.
As an infrastructure, as an IM. And therefore what that does is it then says to you, there's a long-term role of the large rail entities is actually more of an IM rather than being an operator. Yes. Should we be separating other operations out of the current vertically integrated model? It is important, because when we get to the devolution portion, some of us in the regions are saying, well, we want to take on the rail over the operations role. And operations, you have to be careful with it, because operations is operations and day-to-day maintenance.
So one of the things that I think is quite interesting, so if we had to take Transnet, which is not passenger, and it's October, so this is a big month for Transnet. They putting in their Chinese walls, and I don't know if it's best practice, but then I don't really know what is best practice, because everybody's done something different to suit them in terms of their own rail reform and open access and infrastructure managers. But like PRASA hasn't put together their network statement yet. And I would have thought that they would be required to meet the same deadlines.
Not necessarily. What we've done with PRASA, the idea was that allow them to rebuild the network.
Okay, so the recovery first.
You can't even put out a network statement, because the network statement must contain what are you willing to let go of.
Yes, and the state of that.
And the state of what it is. And it is only when you have some sort of a network to talk about that you can put a network statement out. Until they get to a point where they say, these are the lines we want to run. Because that decision has not been made as yet. And then these are the lines that we're not going to recover, but we're going to give out to other parties to operate and rebuild. That is an important decision that needs to be taken. So we cannot rush them into that space as yet. But again, we go back to the issue of who keeps the network, who keeps operation, who presides over the budget, and then who sets the face.
Exactly, because that's a big thing, especially for PRASA, because there is, that crossover with Transnet and that infrastructure as well. Where do you think, in your opinion, is the biggest value for a municipality to take on that passenger rail as a solution?
Let's go back to the
nitty-gritty stuff.
One of the advisors, and I've just spent a bit of time with these guys from Salga. They're doing their own study to be able to understand what the cities should do. Yeah. And I said to them, it took me 10 years to build the agency that you see. 10 years. Yeah. And not from the lack of trying and trying to speed it up and do all sorts of other things. It's because physically to build an agency that's got policies, that's got the capability, that's got the know-how, that's got the people in it, takes time. Now, first and foremost, municipalities don't even have one rail engineer. Let's start there. One rail engineer. We can't sort out the potholes, but we want to go and work on the mud holes of the rail line. I'm saying to you, can we get to a point where we acknowledge the fact that there are requirements, and those requirements such as you being able to build an entity that is able to do this. But we see that as an opportunity, because for us, as the Gautrain Management Agency, in this case, that is an opportunity for us to provide services of the same thing that we do in Gauteng to everybody else around the whole of South Africa and even in the continent.
It'll be good business for you.
It will be good business for us.
And you've learned the lessons already.
We have learned the lessons, we've got the policies, we've got everything that is required. And then, over time, we can then transition where we help cities build their own capacity, and then we get out of there and allow them to build their own agency. We have no aspirations of being stuck in cities for years.
So now talk to me about your African strategy.
So the Africa strategy is, in itself, it's alive and well. So we've got 3 projects, and part of the restructuring was us figuring out where would we host these 3 projects. So we are talking to a team in Namibia that is now wanting us to come and work with them on 3 lines. So the Trans-Kunene line, which is the line that goes into the Kunene province in Angola from Windhoek, the Windhoek metro itself, and the southern line, which is Windhoek to Upington. And these are projects that are live at the current moment. And now what we've had to do is actually lean on what AXA and Transnet has done, and look at building an international leg of the entity itself. So similarly, you've got AXA International, you've got Transnet International. We're going to end up with GMA, Go Mobility, Go Mobility Agency.
Yes, or Get Mobility Agency.
Yeah, Get Mobility Agency. But the Gautrain Management Agency in itself will end up with and the board has approved that we go in that direction, because what it does is it also ring fences the risk, it ring fences the operations, and it also ring fences the tax related issues that what they call it. Yes, it will still consolidate into the larger entity, but it gives us the space to be able to operate with that entity and operate on the rules of that particular country when we're working.
And is this now going to put you in a position where you are looking at the line, looking at the specifications, looking at the best way for operations, looking at the rolling stock?
Yes, what that does is it allows us to be able to take best practice and lessons learned from what we're doing today, and then be able to share it with everybody. But also be able to put in place systems and capabilities in place in those respective countries to be able to assist with all of that, including a simple thing of, we were talking to a client in Namibia who wanted us to be able to help them out with buying rolling stock for one of their freight lines. Assess what they have today, and then assess the capacity of what they can do. But what it ended up happening is that we went in for talking about rolling stock, but I said, but where's your operational plan? Because if I know your operational plan, I can explain to you what capacity do you need. Now, eventually we had to roll back and develop a rolling stock, an operation plan. And once you've developed an operations plan, and then we have to then develop a human resource plan. And then the human resource plan and the operations plan will tell you the amount of rolling stock that you need more than anything else. So we eventually were, you're going up the hill and up the hill and up the hill, and then eventually you get to a point and say, but what's your company strategy? Where's the businesses? How much money do you want to make and how much tonnage do you want to carry? And now everybody goes, it's there somewhere. And I say, but where's the value chain that shows this is the top end, this is the company strategy, this is the level of operations we want to run, this is the human resource plan, and ultimately your trains. The trains are actually the last thing that and then your network also, obviously.
Yeah. And then the signaling and then everything, the technology around that. We have coming up now is the tender for the extension 2026. Has that closed yet?
No. Yeah, it doesn't close that yet. It's been extended to October, and so we're waiting for the documents to come back. And we are looking at it overall.
How long is your adjudication process going to be?
We think it will take about 4 to 5 months. We're not going to have a lot of back and forth on the optimization of the document. So the document that comes back would actually be already fettered in such a way that that's the contract. And therefore all we're talking about is what sits as the addendums to the contract. And that will save us time.
Yeah, because apples for apples.
Apples for apples, but also negotiating on the things that matter. The contract will be set, the levels of operations are set, there's not much you can do. The Gautrain is already a running system, so the levels of operation can only get better rather than go down. And then we'll negotiate about the additional rolling stock, the additional signaling, the change to the signaling, the change to the electrical system more than anything else.
There's a requirement for more rolling stock?
What we've done, we've just wrapped it into that particular tender. Yes. So it will come as part of the package.
I think it's all very exciting.
I am looking forward to this rail renaissance, and as Muso said, out with the old and in with the new.